I think Doug Pederson is under a lot of pressure over the next month. First question comes from Ronnie. That's at Trey40 on Twitter. Thoughts on Antonio Pierce's comments and some players making business decisions, and what's your view of the Raiders quarterback situation? On the first question, in case anybody missed it, Antonio Pierce delivered what might have been the quote of the week in saying that he saw some of his players making business decisions out there in their loss to the Panthers. So the team accordingly was going to have to make some business decisions of their own. Now, none of those decisions have become public yet, but he did deliver a very strong message to his locker room. And to me, this is the sort of thing that only an ex-player can get away with at this early juncture in his time as a head coach. And he can get away with it because he has skins on the wall. He knows what relentless effort looks like from between the lines. And so he has the credibility to deliver a line like this and have it resonate in the locker room. I also think this has to do with what he's trying to build. And the time that I got to spend with Antonio over the summer, one thing that was really clear, and he worked with the ex-head coaches that he has in the building, and Joe Philbin and Marvin Lewis, and another one he's brought in periodically, and Tom Coughlin, who was his coach with the Giants, is there's a very clear vision that they're trying to manifest there in Vegas right now. And the vision for their team is very much reflective of who Antonio Pierce was as a player: aggressive, physical, relentless. And so a big part of trying to make that vision come to life, which I think it did at the end of last year when he was still the interim coach, is relentless effort. And so that's one thing that I'm sure AP feels like he has to stay on top of if he wants his long-term vision to play out. Like in the short term, he can't let those little things slip if he wants that vision to play out over a longer period of time. And again, he's using his credibility as a player because he was that type of player to use the megaphone that the media, that social media, that all the rest of it gives him. This puts pressure on his players. Doing this publicly rather than just privately really puts it on his players now. Like, hey, I'm not afraid to say something when I see something. And I actually think it's a pretty smart move to go and say what you're saying here. And again, we don't know publicly what he's done, what business decisions have been made as a result of their loss on Sunday to the Panthers. But I do think that there's some logic to doing things this way and handling things this way. And I think this is more than just Antonio Pierce losing his cool a little bit after an ugly loss to Carolina. On the quarterback situation, I think it is what it looks like, which is a stopgap for what will be the long-term answer, whether that's someone like Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers or Shedeur Sanders or somebody else on the veteran market. I don't know that the long-term answer, I don't think the long-term answer for the team at the quarterback position is on the roster right now. And so they're making it work with Gardner Minshew, who's been pretty good. He was under contract for 2 years. And Aiden O'Connell, who is in his second year and under contract for another 3 years. They've got some time to figure it out, or at least they hope they'll have some time to figure it out. And given that time, I think they've tried to find a suitable answer at the position. I think Gardner Minshew can very much be that. And Aiden O'Connell has shown signs that maybe he can be too. All right, question number 2 from Aaron Wiles. That's at Aaron Wiles 7. Is Doug Pederson's seat getting hot in Jacksonville? And this is an interesting situation. There are a few different things at play here. Number one, you've got an owner who has made the playoffs once since he bought the team. That was in 2017 in Doug Marrone's first year. This is an owner who's generally been patient. Now, his first coach was out of there very quick. He fired Jack Del Rio after getting the team. He had Mike Mularkey for a year, decided to hit a hard reset. Then he gave Gus Bradley and Dave Caldwell 4 years. Then after that, after firing those guys, he gave Dave Caldwell coming back, Doug Marrone promoted, and Tom Coughlin coming in 4 years to see out their plan. Then Urban Meyer was for a year. Obviously, that was a train wreck, so he had to hit reset again, held on to Trent Baalke, and now he's gone to Doug Pederson, who's in his third year. The Jaguars, after a really promising start to the Pederson era, have backslid in a bad way. Wild card round that first year, looks like Trevor Lawrence has turned around and is on track to become the sort of prospect um, and player that we thought he was going to be over his 3 years at Clemson. When we were all projecting him to be the first overall pick, it looks like the team is coming together. And somewhere along the lines, things came off the rails last year. They started 8-3, which looked like a continuation of the momentum from the year before. They finished 1-5. They're 0-3 now, which means they're 1-8 in their last 9 games. They also have a roster that looks like it's rewarded a lot of good players with great money. Christian Kirk, Cam Robinson, Josh Allen's really good. I think he'd probably be a core player on most teams, but he's being paid at a very high rate too. Tyson Campbell. So I think, if you're Shad Khan, you got to look at this plan. Where's the momentum? It's not in a good place. Where are those players you've paid? Again, they're good, not great players. And you have to think about where you're at and where you're going. And one of the places you're going is to a completely renovated stadium where you're going to need to sell suites, you're going to need to sell sponsorships. So that can add another layer to everything that's going on. And you need credibility to do that. Is the current group giving you credibility? The other element, they go to London for 2 weeks, a couple of weeks from now. So they'll play two division games against the Texans and the Colts, playing an angry Texans team, and then a Colts team that I still think is pretty good. And then they'll play the Bears and Patriots back to back in London, another place where Shad Khan has really invested. So if they go there 0-5 and they come back 0-7, now are we talking about a situation where you've embarrassed Shad Khan? And a lot of times billionaire owners will react when they're embarrassed. So all of these things I think are in play with where Doug Pederson is. Does the owner need credibility? Is the owner embarrassed by what he'll be bringing to and back from London? Does the owner feel pressure from a business standpoint to have something better now with some of the realities that are ahead for the franchise as they move into a period where they'll be out of their stadium for a couple of years and then going back into a completely renovated stadium? I think all of these things can be in play. And so I think Doug Pederson is under a lot of pressure over the next month to get this thing turned around and show some real progress. And I think another thing that is, an element here is the relationship the Khan family has with Bill Belichick. When they hired Doug Marrone in 2017, one of the guys they leaned on for advice on that was Bill Belichick, who has ties to Marrone through the Bill Parcells tree, and has built a relationship with Tony Khan over the years, Shad Khan's son. So I certainly think this is one where Belichick could be looming, the same way he is over a couple of NFC East teams, and certainly a situation that bears watching, and an attractive situation for another coach coming in that you've got the quarterback in place, teams in Florida, owners shown to be patient in the past. Um, they really have something to sell there. And, if you want to get a young quarterback turned around, there's the pressure to do that too, which can be a drawing card for a guy who really, after everything he's been through, would still believe in Trevor Lawrence. All right, third question from Ed Helinsky, or Helensky, I think. Helensky. It's at Mr. Ed 315. After 3 weeks, who do you have for the most surprising team? Surprising can be good or bad. I'll give you one of each. And on the bad side, I would say it's the Bengals. And a lot of people are going to point to Joe Burrow. They're going to point to Jamar Chase. Those guys were not perfect in week one. Certainly I think Joe Burrow showed some rust coming back off the wrist injury. I think Jamar Chase showed that he needed a little bit more ramping up after missing most of training camp. They were better in week two. Those guys played well enough to beat Kansas City and Arrowhead. And then in week three, I think those guys were everything you needed them to be to win that game. Joe Burrow threw for over 300 yards. Jamar Chase went for over 100 and a couple touchdowns. They aren't the problem. Right now, the defense is the problem. And I think where they are defensively a month from now will tell the tale. I picked the Bengals to be in the Super Bowl. So I think that they're capable of a lot more than where they're at right now. But I think the next month becomes critical to whether or not they can be there. I think they can overcome the 0-3 start. It's going to come down to Do they get enough of a rush from the defensive line? And guys like Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard, without DJ Reed are there anymore. Of course, he got injured at the end of last year, and now he's not on the team anymore. And then, what do they get out of the corner position? And I think it's instructive to look at who got beat on Monday night. That was Dax Hill, who was drafted to play safety, who played inside corner at Michigan. Um, you have a guy who's a converted safety, converted nickel, playing outside corner, getting beat by one of the best receivers in football. Sort of indicative of the issue they've had there. Cam Taylor-Britt struggled a little bit on Monday night against Washington. So how do the young corners come along? What does the pass rush look like? That's going to determine where the Bengals go. Another team that would be in that bucket is the other team I picked to win the Super Bowl, to get to the Super Bowl. The team I actually picked to win the Super Bowl, and that's the Niners at 1-2. You obviously figured it'd look a little better than it has. On the upside, on the good surprise side, Seattle's obviously in that mix. I think Buffalo, you expected they'd be good. They've been good for a long time, but to be this dominant, that's really been eye-opening to watch them and see where they're at. The Steelers have been really good. The Commanders, I think, would be another one that you would look, but the one I'm going to pick out is the Minnesota Vikings. And I say surprise as a guy who really does believe in what Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah have built there over the last couple of years. But I thought there would be at least a little bit more of a bump in the early part of the year, where losing your quarterback of the last 6 years in Kirk Cousins, and maybe the most important player for the franchise over the last 10 years in Daniil Hunter, was going to have some sort of effect. Instead, it's really just shown the strength of their program. You bring in Jonathan Grenard from Houston. You bring in Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami. You draft Dallas Turner, who didn't play on Sunday, but I think will be a valuable piece. You sign Sam Darnold. You draft J.J. McCarthy, and it looks like you're better. And the Giants win, I think, we were all kind of looking at it and saying, okay, well, where are the Giants? The last 2 weeks have really got my attention. To beat a Niners team that was coming off of beating the brakes off the Jets in week 1. And yes, they were on short weeks, but they beat the brakes off the Jets in week 1. To do that and then follow it up by beating a Houston Texans team that I think is going to be there in the end and could wind up making a conference title game this year. I think you can't say enough for where Minnesota is. Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, Josh McCown, all the guys they have coaching on the offensive side of the ball have obviously done a fantastic job with Sam Darnold, and getting him ready to play. And Darnold has played great, even in spots when Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and T.J. Hawkinson were on the field. Hawkinson obviously is a piece they'll get back a little bit later, but the other two have been a little nicked up. And then on defense, to get what they've gotten out of Brian Flores, as hard as they are to play against if you're another team, because of everything Brian Flores has done and how they've been able to get good, smart players in there, like a Grenard, like a Van Ginkel, having Harrison Smith as the captain on the back end of the defense. I think you cannot say enough for what the job the Vikings have done. And now they're younger. They have more flexibility going forward. It's just a really sound operation. And I'm really impressed with where the Vikings are at 3-0, and not just being at 3-0, but how they've got there.